She said I do to save a broken millionaire, not knowing he was testing her heart. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. Rain poured over the glass walls of Street Helena Medical Center, streaking down like tears the night Mara Lewis met Adrian Cole for the first time. She was working late again, double shift, trying to cover her father's hospital bills and the mounting debts that threatened to shut down the small community clinic he had founded. The clock had just passed 11 when she heard a quiet knock on the door of her office. A tall man stood there, dressed in a black suit that looked expensive but worn at the edges, like its owner had not cared for it in months. His face was pale, his left hand wrapped in a bandage, and his eyes, gray and tired, held the weight of someone who had once commanded entire boardrooms, but now carried only silence. "Mara Lewis?" he asked, his voice low, deliberate. She nodded cautiously. "Yes, how can I help you, mister?" "In my 3-2S. Cole," he said simply. Adrian Cole. The name hit her like thunder. Every newspaper had written about him, the fallen millionaire, the CEO whose empire crumbled after a devastating car accident and a betrayal from his closest partner. His company had been taken from him, his reputation destroyed. The tabloids called him the Broken Millionaire. She hesitated. "Mr. Cole, I am sorry, but visiting hours ended 2 hours ago." "I am not here for treatment," he said. "I am here to make you an offer." Something in his tone made her heart race. "An offer?" He looked around the dim office, the flickering light above them, buzzing softly, then met her eyes. "If you agree to marry me," he said, "I will save your father's clinic." The world seemed to stop. She blinked, half certain she had misheard him. "Marry you?" "Yes," he said, calm and steady. "A legal marriage. 3 months. No strings beyond what is written in a contract. You get the funds to pay off your debts and keep the clinic open. I get what I need to rebuild my public image." Her breath caught. "Why me?" "Because you are not part of my world," he answered. "You have nothing to gain from using me and nothing to lose by pretending." Mara felt her pulse in her throat. Everything about it sounded wrong, but so had the eviction notice taped to her clinic door that morning. She looked down at her trembling hands, then back at him. "This is insane." "Probably," he replied softly, "but sometimes insanity is the only way to survive." He placed a manila envelope on her desk. Inside was a marriage contract and a check big enough to cover the clinic's debts twice over. "Think about it," he said. "You have 24 hours. After that, the offer disappears." He turned to leave, his reflection flickering in the Rain Street window. Before she could speak, he paused at the door and looked back. "You wanted to save lives, Miss Lewis. Start with mine. In the clams herself I'd have met a rasterby self as selfermans." And just like that, the man everyone thought was heartless left her office, leaving behind nothing but the soft echo of a proposal no one would ever believe. Mara stood frozen, the envelope in her hand, the rain drumming against the glass. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, as if warning her that whatever she decided tonight would change everything. The next morning came gray and heavy, the kind of morning that made the city feel slower, quieter, as if it too was waiting for her answer. Mara barely slept. She had spent the entire night staring at the contract on her desk, the inked words blurring every time she tried to read them again. Her father's clinic was days away from being shut down. Without money, the patients, mostly veterans and families without insurance, would have nowhere to go. She had always believed that integrity was the one thing she could never sell. But desperation has a way of changing the way right and wrong look under the same light. At dawn, she folded the contract, slipped it into her purse, and took the first bus to the address written on the back of Adrian's business card. It led her to the upper floors of a quiet high-rise downtown, a private penthouse. The elevator opened to a view of glass walls and empty marble floors. Everything looked cold, untouched, too perfect to feel alive. Adrian stood near the window, staring at the skyline like he was trying to remember what it used to feel like to belong there. When he turned to her, his face was unreadable. "You came," he said simply. Mara set her purse on the counter. "I am not sure what that says about me." "It says you are brave," he replied. Or foolish. Maybe both. He gestured toward the table. 2 copies of the contract were already laid out beside a black fountain pen. There are a few conditions, he said. 3 months of marriage. Appear at public events as my wife. No interviews. No press outside of what my team arranges. When it ends, you will receive the full payment for your clinic, plus an additional sum for your trouble. She listened in silence, her palms damp. And what do you get out of it? A chance, he said, his voice quiet. A chance to make the world forget that I failed. For a long moment, the only sound was the city below. Mara looked down at the page in front of her. The words were neat, almost too clean for what they meant. Her pen hovered above the line. Then she signed. Adrian picked up the second pen, signed his name beside hers, and closed the folder. Congratulations, he said, sliding a small velvet box across the table. Inside was a simple silver ring. This feels wrong, she murmured. It is not love, he answered. It is survival. That afternoon, they went to the courthouse. There were no flowers, no guests, no music, just the clerk, 2 signatures, and the hollow echo of vows spoken without emotion. When the words, "You may kiss the bride," came, Adrian only nodded politely. Mara offered a faint smile, and they turned away, strangers bound by ink and necessity. As they walked out into the sunlight, she caught their reflection in the glass doors, his posture straight, her eyes uncertain, and for a fleeting second she wondered which one of them looked more like the liar. By evening, she was standing alone in the guest room of his penthouse, a suitcase at her feet, the city lights stretching endlessly below. The silence was thick, broken only by the sound of rain starting again. In the mirror she saw the ring glint under the soft light. It looked small, harmless, almost innocent, but deep down, Mara knew it was not a symbol of love. It was a promise built on secrets, and one day, those secrets would come for her. Days turned into weeks, and the arrangement that had started with silence slowly became a routine. Every morning, Mara woke up before sunrise, made coffee, and left a cup outside Adrian's office door. She never knocked, and he never said thank you, but the cup was always empty by noon. It became their quiet ritual, an invisible thread tying 2 strangers together under one roof. The penthouse felt like a museum of a life that had stopped halfway. The shelves were lined with unopened books, the grand piano coated with a fine layer of dust. Adrian spent hours inside his study, rebuilding the pieces of his fallen empire, while Mara tried her best to stay out of his way. One afternoon, his assistant arrived with a team of stylists. "Mrs. Cole," one of them said, smiling too brightly, "you have fittings scheduled for tonight's charity gala. Mr. Cole wants you by his side." Mara blinked. "What? I am not ready for that. I do not belong at a place like," the assistant interrupted gently. "He insists." That evening, the transformation began. Her plain clothes were replaced with an elegant black gown that hugged her figure just right. A makeup artist softened her freckles, and a hairstylist pulled her dark hair into a sleek twist. When she looked in the mirror, even she barely recognized herself. When Adrian saw her standing at the top of the staircase, he froze for a fraction of a second. His eyes softened, almost imperceptibly, before he turned away. "You look appropriate," he said quietly. "Thank you," she replied, though a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. The gala was held at the Grand Pavilion downtown, filled with gold light, expensive laughter, and the low hum of classical music. As soon as they entered, cameras flashed. Adrian's hand rested gently on her back, steady but distant, a gesture practiced to look intimate. Whispers followed them like shadows. "That is her, the nurse he married. She looks lost. Poor thing, she must be after his money." Mara's chest tightened, but she kept her head high. Adrian moved through the crowd effortlessly, shaking hands, smiling that polished smile of a man who knew how to play the part of power. Yet every so often, his eyes flicked toward her, as if to make sure she was still standing. Near the end of the evening, a board member cornered them near the bar. His tone was polite but sharp. "Mr. Cole, your recovery is impressive, though I must say this sudden marriage feels strategic." Mara's fingers clenched around her glass, but before Adrian could answer, she spoke. "It was not strategy," she said calmly. "It was hope. Sometimes people fall, and they need someone to stand next to them while they try again." The man looked taken aback, muttered something, and walked away. When she turned, Adrian was watching her, with quiet astonishment. Later that night, back in the car, the city lights washed over his face. For the first time since their marriage, his voice lost its edge. "You did not have to defend me," he said softly. "I know," she replied, looking out the window. "But maybe you deserved it." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was warm, fragile, real, and as the car moved through the rain-slicked streets, Adrian Cole, the broken millionaire, who claimed he had no heart left to give, realized that for the first time in years, someone had stood up for him without asking for anything in return. The morning after the gala, sunlight filtered through the glass walls of the penthouse, catching the faint shimmer of the silver ring on Mara's finger. She stood in the kitchen, still half in disbelief at how she had survived the night before. Adrian had not said much after they returned, but something in his eyes had changed, less guarded, more human. She poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one outside his office door like always. When she turned to leave, the door opened unexpectedly. Adrian stood there, shirt sleeves rolled up, his expression unreadable. "You handled yourself well last night," he said. Mara smiled faintly. "Thank you. I only said what I believed." He nodded slowly. "You spoke like someone who has something to protect." "Maybe I do," she replied. For a moment they just looked at each other, the silence between them heavy but not uncomfortable. Then he said, "I have to attend a meeting downtown this afternoon. You should come. It will help people see we are united." Hours later, Mara found herself sitting beside him in a boardroom filled with sharp suits and colder eyes. It was clear that the men around the table doubted him, doubted them. They saw her as a prop in his comeback story. When one of the executives made a remark about charity marriages, Adrian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Mara could feel his anger under the table, steady as a heartbeat. After the meeting, they stepped outside into the crisp air. He exhaled slowly, almost like the weight of the entire company was pressing down on his chest. "You do not have to come to these things," he muttered. "They are brutal." "And at Waysome Cap Press, that is that waiter." "I can handle brutal," she said. "I grew up watching my father lose everything, one medical bill at a time. Words do not scare me." For the first time, he laughed, a real laugh, quiet and unexpected. It sounded rusty, as if it had been locked away for too long. "Maybe you are the only person who can handle me," he said. "Do not test that theory," she replied, smiling despite herself. That night after dinner, Mara walked into the living room and found him at the piano. The lid was open, his hands hovering above the keys like he was afraid to touch them. "I did not know you played," she said. He glanced up. "I used to, before the accident." His another ficuli presiders was Mater. He pressed one key, the soft note hanging in the air before fading. "I have not touched this thing in over a year. I thought music belonged to another life. Maybe it is time to take it back," she said quietly. He looked at her for a long moment, then shifted on the bench. "Sit." When she hesitated, he added, "It is not a request." She sat beside him, her shoulder brushing his arm. The first few notes were clumsy, uncertain, but then the melody found its rhythm, gentle, haunting, full of ache. When the final chord lingered in the air, he whispered, "Do you ever wonder what we would be if this were real?" Mara's breath caught. "Do you?" He looked away. "Every day," and breasted Johnner. For a long time, neither of them moved. The piano fell silent, but something else, something fragile and unspoken, began to stir in the space between them. Mara realized that the man she had agreed to marry out of necessity was slowly turning into someone she wanted to understand. And Adrian Cole, the broken millionaire who claimed love was just a contract, was beginning to forget where the contract ended and his heart began. A few days after the night at the piano, the world around them began to shift. News outlets that once mocked Adrian's downfall now started to whisper about his comeback. Investors returned, clients called again, and for the first time in months, the name Adrian Cole was spoken with respect instead of pity. But for Mara, the change was more personal. She had begun to see traces of the man beneath the suit, the quiet ways he paid attention, the late-night emails he wrote to keep his employees from being laid off, the tired smile he gave her every morning before coffee. He was still guarded, but the wall between them was no longer made of stone. It was glass, thin and trembling. One Friday evening, Adrian told her to be ready by 7. "There is a small company event," he said. "It is nothing fancy." And S. Enleaded. jaw to the wide. When the car pulled up to the Cole Foundation's new building, Mara realized it was not small at all. The lobby was glowing with light, the air filled with the murmur of reporters and flashing cameras. As they stepped out, whispers began immediately. That is her, his wife. The one who saved his image. Adrian reached for her hand. It was the first time he had ever done that in public. His fingers were warm, steady. Just stay close, he murmured, and smile if you can. Inside, the speeches began. Adrian spoke briefly about resilience, about rebuilding from nothing, about how some things he paused and glanced at her are worth fighting for even when they seem lost. The audience applauded. Mara felt pride rise in her chest, mixed with something that scared her more than she wanted to admit. Later, as guests mingled, she slipped away to the balcony for air. The city stretched below, glittering like a sea of stars. She was not alone for long. Adrian joined her, his tie loosened, his voice quieter than usual. You hate crowds, he said. I do, she admitted, but I like watching you in them. You look like you belong again. He smiled faintly. I am not sure I ever really did. They stood side by side, the night wind brushing past them. You know, he said after a pause, I told myself this arrangement would stay simple, that feelings were just complications. Are they? She asked softly. He turned to face her. They are dangerous. Then why do you sound like you want them anyway? He looked at her for a long time before answering. Because you make it impossible not to. Before either of them could say another word, the balcony door opened. A young assistant rushed out, holding a phone. Mr. Cole, you should see this. It is online. Adrian took the phone, his eyes narrowing as he scrolled. On the screen, a headline flashed in bold letters. Inside the fake marriage of Adrian Cole, sources claim contracted love. The color drained from Mara's face. They know, she whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened, the soft warmth in his eyes turning to steel. Someone leaked it, he said. Someone from inside. Reporters had already started gathering outside the building. The story spread like wildfire, rumors, lies, and half-truths, twisted into something cruel. Mara felt her chest tighten. You promised this would stay private. I will fix it, he said. Just trust me. But as cameras began flashing below and shouts echoed from the street, she realized the one thing she had built her fragile peace on, anonymity, was gone. That night, as the city buzzed with gossip, Mara lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time, she wondered if Adrian's offer had been more than a lifeline. Maybe it had been a test from the very beginning, and she had just failed it. The next morning, the city woke up to chaos. Every newspaper, every talk show, every gossip site carried the same story. The Broken Millionaire's fake wife. Photos from the gala covered the front pages, Adrian holding her hand. The way he looked at her, even the ring that had once seemed meaningless, now gleamed like evidence of deceit. Mara sat at the kitchen table, her phone buzzing non-stop with messages she could not bear to read. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the headlines. Words like scam, contract marriage, and charity case flashed before her eyes. Each one hit harder than the last. Adrian came out of his study, his expression grim. You should not read those, he said. How can I not? She asked. They are everywhere. They are saying I used you, that I sold myself for money. His jaw tightened. It will pass. I will issue a statement. When? She demanded. Before or after they destroy what is left of my father's name. He said nothing. His silence felt like betrayal. By noon, reporters had gathered outside the building. Camera flashes lit up the lobby, voices calling out her name. Adrian's security tried to hold them back, but the damage was already done. Inside, Mara paced the living room, while Adrian took a call near the window. I said I will handle it, he snapped into the phone. No, the marriage stays. Pull the press release. I want control of the narrative. When he hung up, she stared at him. You are not defending me, she said quietly. You are defending yourself. He met her gaze, tired and guarded. This is business, Mara. You knew what you were agreeing to. Her voice cracked. I thought I did. She grabbed her coat and walked out before he could stop her. The cold air outside stung her skin as she pushed through the crowd. Someone shouted her name, and for a second, she caught her reflection in a photographer's lens, her face pale, eyes wet, the ring glinting under the flashes. She felt exposed, humiliated, and painfully alone. Hours later, she found herself standing outside the small clinic her father had built. The front door was locked, the paint chipped, but inside she could still smell the faint trace of antiseptic and hope. She sank onto the front steps, burying her face in her hands. Her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Adrian. "Come home, please." She stared at the words, her chest tightening. But home did not feel like the penthouse anymore. It felt like a lie wrapped in marble and glass. That night, she rented a small room in a modest hotel across the river. She sat by the window, watching the skyline glow in the distance. The same skyline where Adrian was probably fighting fires she did not start, but would still be blamed for. As the clock neared midnight, her phone buzzed one last time. It was a news alert. Sources claim Adrian Cole's marriage was part of a loyalty test for future investors. Her stomach dropped. A loyalty test. The pieces fell into place, his cold composure, the controlled leaks, the timing. The marriage had never just been about saving his image. It had been about testing hers. Mara turned off the phone and stared out into the city lights. The man she thought she was saving had been testing her from the very beginning. And the cruelest part was, she had fallen in love with him anyway. For 3 days, Mara disappeared. No calls, no messages, no trace of where she went. The world kept spinning, headlines shifting to new scandals, but for Adrian, the silence was unbearable. The penthouse that once felt like a fortress now felt hollow, haunted by her absence. He told himself he was not worried, that she had made her choice, that this was what contracts were for clean beginnings and clean endings. But every time he walked past the coffee cup she used to leave by his door, he stopped, staring at the empty space where it used to sit. By the fourth night, he broke. He drove through the rain to her father's clinic, the place where it had all started. The building was dark, its sign half burned out. Through the glass, he saw a faint light from the back room. Mara sat at her father's old desk, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a stack of unopened bills in front of her. Her eyes lifted when she heard the door creak open. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tired but steady. Adrian stepped inside, drenched from the storm. "You would not answer my calls." "I had nothing left to say," she said quietly. He took a slow breath. "You read the article." "Every word," she replied. "Tell me it is not true. Tell me you did not use me to test loyalty for your investors." He could not. The silence between them was louder than any confession. Her eyes glistened. "So it was all business. Even me. It started that way," he said. "But it did not stay that way." Mara let out a bitter laugh. "You wanted to see if I would stay when the world turned against us. You call that a test? You call that love?" His jaw tightened. "I call it a mistake. Then we finally agree on something." She stood, her voice trembling but strong. "Do you know what hurts the most? Not the lies. It is that you looked me in the eye every day and made me believe I mattered." Adrian took a step closer. "You do. There's sit of the possible, there's nowherity with a numb con about to bond. It is nowhered. It's possibly and is the intention." "Not enough," she said, pulling the ring from her finger. It hit the floor with a soft metallic sound that sliced through the room. "You wanted to test my heart, Adrian. Congratulations, you broke it instead." For a moment he looked like he wanted to say something, to fix it, to beg, but the words never came. She walked past him, her coat brushing his arm as she left the clinic. The rain swallowed her footsteps. Adrian remained standing there long after she was gone. The envelope of unpaid bills still lay open on the desk. He picked it up, his throat tight. Among the papers was a photograph of her father shaking hands with patients, smiling despite the fading paint on the clinic walls. He understood then what he had destroyed. Not just her trust, but the one thing she had believed in, the idea that love could exist without calculation. Back at the penthouse, he poured himself a drink, but it tasted like guilt. For the first time, the broken millionaire felt truly bankrupt, not in money, but in everything that mattered. Outside, thunder rolled again over the city, just like the night she had first said, "I do." And for the first time, Adrian Cole wondered if he would ever deserve to hear those words again. 2 weeks passed. The world had moved on, but Adrian Cole had not. His empire was steady again, the headlines had cooled, and his public image had been repaired, at least on paper. But inside, he was still standing in the ruins of what he had built. Every night, he replayed her words in his head, each one cutting deeper than the last. You wanted to test my heart. You broke it instead. It echoed through every room, in every quiet moment. He stopped attending meetings. The coffee she used to make sat untouched on the counter every morning. Even his assistant noticed the change but did not dare to ask why. The man who once ruled boardrooms now spent hours staring at the city skyline, searching for something that no longer lived there. Then, one afternoon, he made a decision. He called a press conference, no scripts, no PR team, no handlers. The media gathered, curious, expecting another statement about his latest business success. But when Adrian stepped onto the stage, there was no arrogance in his posture, only exhaustion and truth. I want to address something that I should have said long ago, he began. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed him. The rumors about my marriage being a contract, they were true. I orchestrated it. I believed that loyalty could be measured through hardship, that sincerity could be proven through tests. I was wrong. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. He continued. The woman I married did not deceive me. I deceived her. I wanted to test her kindness, but instead, she revealed mine was gone. And now I must live with that. He stepped away from the podium, ignoring the flashing lights, and shouted questions. For once, he did not care what they wrote tomorrow. The truth was enough. That evening, Mara watched the broadcast from the small apartment she had moved into. Her hands trembled as she turned up the volume, listening to every word. She had promised herself she would never cry for him again, but tears still found her. He had said her name. Not my wife, not Mrs. Cole, but Mara. It sounded like an apology and a prayer all at once. Later that night, she received an email from the Cole Foundation. Attached was a legal document transferring full ownership of her father's clinic back to her name. The subject line was only 3 words. It was always yours. She stared at the screen, torn between anger and relief. The clinic was safe, now free of debt, free of his name. Yet somehow the victory felt hollow. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakable. Mara, I do not expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that you were never part of the test. You were the answer I was too blind to see. The foundation will carry your father's name now. It is the least I can do for the only person who ever made me believe I could still be good. Adrian. She folded the letter carefully, holding it against her chest. For a long time she stood by the window, the city lights flickering outside like tiny promises. Somewhere in that same city, Adrian walked alone through the rain, the same way he had on the night they met. Only this time, he was not running from scandal or shame. He was walking toward redemption, slow, deliberate, and painfully real. He had finally done something with no agenda, no test, no contract. He had told the truth. And even if she never came back, Adrian Cole had finally learned what it meant to earn love not by control, but by letting go. Spring came quietly that year. The air felt softer, the city brighter. But for Mara Lewis, time still carried the weight of everything she had lost and everything she had learned. She had reopened her father's clinic under a new name, the Heart Foundation. The waiting room smelled of fresh paint and hope. For the first time in months, the place was full again. She spent her days treating patients, organizing donations, and training young volunteers. Life had found its rhythm, simple and calm, yet every now and then, she caught herself glancing at the door, as if expecting someone who would never walk through it again. On the first anniversary of the clinic's reopening, an invitation arrived without a return address. The card was thick, ivory white, with only one line printed in elegant handwriting. Meet me where you said, I do. A. C. Mara stared at it for a long moment. Her heart wanted to ignore it, but curiosity and something deeper drew her back to that place. That evening, she drove to the small courthouse where their marriage had begun. The building looked exactly the same, simple, quiet, and wrapped in the fading glow of sunset. She half expected the place to be empty, but as she stepped inside, she saw him standing there, Adrian Cole, waiting near the steps, dressed simply in a gray suit, no entourage, no reporters, no pretense. He looked different. The sharpness in his eyes was gone, replaced by something gentler. He smiled faintly, almost unsure. I was not sure you would come, he said. I was not sure either, she replied softly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Inside was the same silver ring she had thrown away months ago, now polished and gleaming. I kept it, he said, not as proof of what we were, but as a reminder of what I ruined. She looked at the ring, her throat tightening. Why bring it back now? Because I finally understand what it should mean, he said. This time, there is no contract, no test, no condition. I am not asking you to save me. I am asking if I can spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Mara's eyes filled with tears. She remembered every lie, every heartbreak, but also every quiet act of kindness that had followed. He had given back her clinic, told the truth publicly, and vanished from her life without asking for redemption. Now he was standing in front of her, asking for nothing but a chance. She took a deep breath. I forgave you a long time ago, she whispered. But I needed to see that you forgave yourself. His voice broke. I am trying. She smiled through her tears, closing the box and placing it back in his hand. Then maybe it is time we both stop testing fate. Outside, the church bells began to ring from somewhere down the street. Adrian reached for her hand, hesitant at first, then firm. She did not pull away. As they stepped out into the evening light, the city stretched before them, no longer a battlefield, but a beginning. The rain from earlier had left the streets shining like glass, and when she looked down, she saw their reflections side by side, walking together for the first time without pretense. The story that had started with a contract and a lie ended with something real. Not a grand declaration, not a fairy tale, just two people who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love is not a test to be passed, but a truth to be lived. And as Adrian whispered her name one last time under the fading sky, Mara finally said the words again, soft, steady, and real. I do.